Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour on a day that made history. Today, something happened in American politics that has never before happened in the history of our republic. In all of the trials and tribulations we have been through as a nation, through the wars, through the Great Depression, through the time when senators used to beat one another with canes inside the Capitol. In everything we have ever been through as a nation, what happened today has never happened before. Not ever. Not one of the 44 presidents our country has had has ever been blocked by a minority in the Senate from choosing someone for his cabinet. But that happened today to President Barack Obama. Republicans in the Senate decided to do something unprecedented to him and to thereby set an entirely new precedent for how the presidency itself is treated in our country. When they said today that even though they could not muster a majority of votes on their side, they would maneuver anyway as a minority to block President Barack Obama from appointing his chosen Secretary of Defense. This has never happened before to anyone ever. I mean, we have had cabinet nominees not make it through the Senate confirmation process before, people who could not win over a majority of the Senate, so they did not get confirmed. We've had that happen. We've had plenty of people pull their name from contention when it became clear that they couldn't win a majority vote, when they could not win confirmation in the Senate. But President Obama's nominee for Defense Secretary, Chuck Hagel, he does have majority support in the Senate. What happened today is that a minority of that body, the Republicans, decided that they were going to block him anyway. Never happened before. They filibustered a cabinet nomination. In the past, over the years, there have been a couple of token efforts at maybe doing this in the past that got a handful of votes and didn't actually slow down or stop anything. But the minority actually blocking the nomination, that is a whole new thing. This is a fresh hell in American politics. And that is why, before today, even Republican senators said it would be nuts to do this. Before today, these senators, these Republicans, for example, all said, yeah, listen, I might be opposed to Chuck Hagel for defense. I might vote no on his nomination, but I'm not going to blow up 220-something years of precedent and filibuster the guy. I'm not going to block there being a vote on him. We've never done that before. Republican Senators John McCain, Roy Blunt, Roger Wicker, Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, all these Republican senators said before today that they might vote no on Chuck Hagel, but they wouldn't block a vote from the minority. They wouldn't filibuster. Well, today, when push came to shove, it was only Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski who kept their word. All the others said they would not filibuster, that would be wrong. And then they did it anyway. John McCain, Roy Blunt, Roger Wicker, Lindsey Graham all said they wouldn't do it, and then they did. Senator Graham, for his part, says he does not want his filibuster today to be thought of as a filibuster, even though that's what it is. He says he prefers to think of what he did today as just blocking the nomination because he wants to use it as leverage to get more information out of the administration on the president's birth certificate. I'm sorry, I mean Fast and Furious. I'm sorry, I mean aliens in Area 51. I'm sorry, I mean his theories about what happened in Benghazi. What does nominee Chuck Hagel know about Benghazi? Precisely nothing. He has nothing to do with it. He had nothing to do with it. But Lindsey Graham is filibustering his nomination over it anyway. I mean, since Chuck Hagel had nothing to do with it substantively, why block his nomination instead of, say, the John Kerry nomination, which sailed through the Senate? Dunno. Why not? Wrecking stuff is fun, maybe? Hulk smash? The guy who the Republicans waited to spring this on for the first time in our nation's history, to break all precedent, is a former Republican senator from a red state, a decorated and wounded combat veteran, nominated to lead the Pentagon while we are at war. Republicans have never before felt the need to filibuster a cabinet nominee in the history of the country, but now apparently this is the time, and this is the guy worth waiting 224 years to spring it on. It has never happened before, but why not now? Heck! The White House is not pleased. Quote, quote, "Today's action runs against both the majority will of the Senate and our nation's interest. This waste of time is not without consequence. We have 66,000 men and women deployed in Afghanistan, and we need our new Secretary of Defense to be a part of significant decisions about how we bring that war to a responsible end. Next week in Brussels, the United States will meet with our allies to talk about the transition in Afghanistan at the NATO Defense Ministerial. And our next Secretary of Defense should be there. For the sake of national security, it's time to stop playing politics with our Department of Defense and to move beyond the distractions and delay. Allow this war hero an up or down vote and let our troops have the Secretary of Defense they deserve." Do you remember when the top Democrat in the Senate, Harry Reid, declared just a few weeks ago that Democrats would not change the rules in the Senate? Remember that? Wouldn't change the rules to stop Senate Republicans from abusing the process there. Harry Reid decided he would just instead make a handshake deal with the Republicans' top senator, Mitch McConnell. He said he was satisfied with the Republicans just agreeing to be more reasonable on issues like this. Remember? They wouldn't change the filibuster rules. They would just agree as gentlemen that the Republicans would curtail the excesses of filibustering everything and effectively ruling from the minority. Democrats decided to not actually change the rules on the filibuster and just make that agreement with the Republicans instead. And they said, at a minimum, this will at least improve the confirmation process for the administration's nominees. How's that working out now? Just a couple of weeks later. How's that gentleman's agreement going now that we've just had a filibuster of a cabinet nominee for the first time in American history? Joining us now is Andrea Mitchell, NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent, the host of Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC. Andrea, it's great to have you here tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rachel.
What happens next here? Does Leon Panetta stay on as defense secretary even after he has gone through all the motions of stepping down and going back home?
Yes, we have had all of these farewell speeches, the most recent today, and then he went off with his wife Sylvia for a Valentine's dinner and was hoping that he wouldn't have to come back. But now he will come back because the Senate is in recess. When these things happen, they don't change their plans for recess. And so Leon Panetta, the lame duck defense secretary, is going to have to lead the delegation and represent the United States at NATO in Brussels for the annual meeting, the big meeting of the NATO defense ministers. And this was supposed to be the debut performance of Chuck Hagel on the world stage. And that is only the first impediment to Hagel by this delay and this, what they claim, the Republicans claim, is not a filibuster, but by any stretch of the imagination, when you have a cloture vote and you get 58 votes and your nominee then cannot get a vote on the floor and they go into recess, that sort of smells like a filibuster.
Have you heard anything about how people inside the Defense Department and even the State Department, the other national security major agencies, how they're reacting tonight? Is there any concern that this holdup is going to project weakness or otherwise be bad for the country?
I think there's a lot of embarrassment and annoyance, anger. We do have Leon Panetta. We have Ash Carter, the Deputy Defense Secretary. So there is leadership. The other sort of incidental but not unimportant victim of all of this is also John Brennan's nomination. Whatever you think of it, that has also been held up until after the recess for very good reasons, many say, because Dianne Feinstein, the head of the Intelligence Committee, is now demanding 7 more legal documents on targeted killings from the administration. The administration says that that's an exaggeration, that some of those that were already turned over actually were simply expansions of some of the 7 she's demanding. But in any case, you're not going to have a CIA director either until after the recess.
If Chuck Hagel ultimately ends up confirmed, and that was part of the White House statement today, saying, listen, he has majority support. He got 58 votes on the cloture vote today, which implies that he is going to be confirmed if they ever allow a vote. Once we get Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, what does what we just went through mean for what the relationship's going to be like between Congress and the Pentagon? Congress and the Pentagon are a little bit at each other's throats right now anyway because of the negotiations around the sequester and how the Pentagon budget is going to proceed not only over this next year but over the next few years. What's it going to mean between Congress and the Pentagon once Chuck Hagel's in charge after they've made him go through this?
Well, if the president thought that by having a Republican in the cabinet at the Pentagon, he was going to buy any kind of loyalty or relationship with Republican senators, he can think again about that, because this simply isn't happening. Chuck Hagel is not going to have relationships with the people who have just humiliated him to this degree. Secondly, he was weakened by his own poor performance, and whether he was playing rope-a-dope, and this was a deliberate tactic, as they say, to not pick a fight and get into an argument in a public forum with John McCain and the others on the committee that he would then have to work with. He didn't fight back enough. Claire McCaskill and other Democrats, Claire, you saw on our show and in other fora, saying, look, he clearly is better at asking questions than answering questions, but still came strongly to his defense, as did the other Democrats on the committee, saying, Joe Manchin and others, saying that he is clearly qualified and the president should have his man there, and that to take one statement out of context from a speech that he gave when he wasn't in office is not really taking the measure of the man. He's not going to have a good relationship with Republicans on that committee, and he is weakened within the Pentagon, where you have that crisp military, be prepared attitude. You know it better than anyone. You've written a book. You've been with the military far more than I have. And Rachel, you know that they have things all down very, very carefully. And the way he performed, the way he answered the questions, that was damaging to him, despite all of the encomiums from so many people, from Brent Scowcroft and Colin Powell and people who Republicans admire and revere, who have all said this man should be confirmed.
I think that we are at an important and fragile and sort of unsettled moment in terms of civilian relationships with the military, in particular political civilian relationships with the military. And this is the biggest wrench in the works I could have possibly imagined. We will have to see how it plays out. Andrea Mitchell, NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent, host of Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC. Andrea, as always, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
All right. The president left Washington today for the comparatively grown-up environment of a room full of 4-year-olds. Went well. Hold on, that's coming up.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. We are for free education. We do not give up. Expect surprises. Subscribe.